Welcome to Practice Your Pause, where I speak to guest experts about how they support, recharge, and reconnect with their nervous system. My name is Mukta Gadkari, and I'm here with a wonderful guest, Jen Walters. Jen Walters is an expert in well-being, mindfulness, and archetypal myth, and she helps her clients, who are busy women, make breathing room inside their full lives. I'm so delighted to have you here, Jen, today. You're just a wonderful presence. I'm going to tell everyone a little bit about how we met later, but first, I would love, love, love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us who you are and who you serve.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me here. So, I am a certified wellness educator, a feng shui practitioner,
Mhm.
and also a meditation teaching trainer. So, I train meditation teachers and practitioners
Mhm.
in a lot of the latest research on the nervous system and how we can use practices to embrace our nervous system and feel at home in our nervous system so that we really can flourish and thrive.
Amazing, amazing. And I think it's so important. I mean, I think it's become even more important in the last couple of years for people to start befriending their nervous systems because um, it's something we don't think about, right? Like once
Mhm.
we get into busy lives and just, multitasking and kids and errands and life in general, we forget that there's a big piece of us that's trying to keep us safe at all times. And if we don't connect with our nervous system, we're missing out on a really big piece of how to um, be happy, but also from a physical health standpoint, there's so many elements there that we're missing out on. So we're not going to get into that obviously today. But I also just wanted to share, Jen's someone I've been wanting to work with for a very, very long time and collaborate with. We met for the first time at the beginning of 2020. Our mats were right next to each other in a yoga studio at Breathe Together Yoga. And I remember so clearly we talked about the 60-day challenge that had just begun, and both of us were not doing the challenge that year. And I remember starting to talk to you about meditation then. And it was wonderful because, it was just for a very brief period of time, but we practiced a few times together. And then I think once the pandemic started, we got connected online. And then I started realizing like all the wonderful things that she actually does. Like the feng shui piece was really interesting, but I also remember you talking about energy decluttering in some ways.
Mhm.
And um, a lot of people know this about me. I love talking about energy. It's like the thing that lights me up. How you preserve your energy, honor your energy, knowing where you're actually wasting your energy. All of that is so, so, so important. And so let's talk a little bit about how you got into what you do, like how you got into meditation, feng shui, and then helping your clients create space in their lives.
Definitely. I think, like a lot of women and just human beings, the conditioning of just the way that I was raised,
Mhm.
I was really focused outward and on, even just from a young age, paying attention to the needs of others, the energy of others, being able to read a room. And
Mhm.
by the time I was a young adult, that was no longer serving me in any way. And I think a lot of women have that experience.
Mhm.
And it became this process of reclaiming some of the
Yeah.
pieces of myself that I had relegated to the shadows in some ways, that I had kind of denied. I grew up when I was young. I was both like really into poetry, as well as like I was the only girl on my baseball team. And trying to navigate a way to integrate all of those pieces of myself and honor them
Mhm.
really led me to these practices. And so I still remember my very first yoga and meditation class. I was 19 and I was in college, and we
Mhm.
walked into this room, and it was actually the judo practice room. So the whole room was a blue mat basically, and there
Mhm.
was this huge transom window across, and we practiced, and I still remember waking up from Shavasana and I just felt completely transformed. And
Yeah.
we sat up, and the way the light was coming through the window,
Hmm.
like it's just seared into my memory. And I think that from that moment onward, I just became obsessed with these practices that
Yeah.
really do, we come home to ourselves in
Hmm.
a more full and embodied way. And
Hmm.
I think we cultivate this ability to be present
Hmm.
in a world that really, at least the modern life, is not built for presence. Like
I,
it is constantly trying, I think, to pull us out of ourselves. And so having these ways to come really back to center and to get grounded and to reconnect with ourselves is basically an obsession of mine.
and it's life changing, right? Like you said, I
Mhm.
mean, as you were talking, you were taking me back to my first, my first interaction with yoga and first yoga class and like having the best sleep of my life, and then coming back to it constantly because of the positive changes that I saw. And like you said, bringing you home to yourself is something that's like totally underrated. you
Yes.
know, in in a world where there's so many distractions, there's
Mhm.
so many, you know, people and things and, like, um, just, I don't know, just thinking about the world at large and social media, everyone is trying to distract you, right? Like with the next thing. And to actually just be able to hold your own and stay present and come home to yourself when things get crazy, is something that, I feel like is very, very, very grounding. And it's one of the things that helps kind of keep me, like, it's almost like my North Star, in some ways. And it sounds like that was something that you discovered at a very young age as well, and realized it was something you wanted, as part of your life.
Definitely.
So,
And I think just listening and into that intuition, I think
mhm,
is so powerful.
yeah,
And just following the breadcrumbs
yeah,
of like, what are the practices? What are the
mhm,
things? So I started with yoga and meditation, and I had always had a passion for mythology. So then my graduate school offered a course in myth and symbolism, and just following those breadcrumbs
mhm,
back to ourselves, I think
mhm,
is really powerful. And so
yeah,
it creates a life that I think isn't just embodied and grounded, but it's also like it's vibrant, it's juicy,
mhm,
it's much more fulfilling, I think, than those periods
yeah,
of time. I think we all have periods of time where we get stress primed and we're living on autopilot and we are reacting rather than responding, and we're not in tune with
mhm,
ourselves and our
mhm,
nervous systems. And so I think we all have that. Like
yeah,
so many people expect me to have like the perfect decluttered home and the best nervous system care and all of that. And I think we're all human. And so
yeah,
we want to look at these things cyclically and know that
yeah,
it's a continual process of coming back and again
mhm,
and again. And I think
mhm,
that's one of the lifelong gifts I think that yoga has given me, is that sense of impermanence and that
mhm,
it's all cyclical, and
yep,
that when it's beautiful it's cyclical and
mhm,
impermanent, and when it's really challenging and I feel disconnected, that there's always going to be a way back home.
yeah. Oh, I love that so much. I think you also said earlier, it's like honoring all parts, right? Like honoring
Mhm.
when things get really, really tough, not to be kind of Pollyanna-ish, but like
Yeah.
honoring it, even though you know that things are shit, but like knowing that there is that path to go home,
Mhm.
go inwards, and that you will, like, I don't even want to say you will grow or you'll heal because that also sounds a bit Pollyanna-ish, but it's like you are going to grow from it, like that that period of when things are really, really terrible is going to be like forever etched in your life somehow,
Yeah.
and um And I think we often just try to throw solutions, at things like that rather than like ride it out, and see where it'll take us. So, I'm sort of digressing here, but I feel like you and I could probably talk for
Oh my
hours
goodness,
about such
yes.
random things. So, the topic for this live is making space for your pause. And that's a really, really juicy, juicy, delicious topic for me. And one of the reasons I have this practice your pause series to begin with is because I don't believe we make enough space for that pause. The pauses come throughout the day. There's so many of those little pauses where, your body's telling you you're tired. It's time for a break, time to go eat something, time to drink some water. And when we don't really pause long enough or make space for that pause, it goes, and then the next pause comes up. And then it's like, okay, are we ready? Are we going to stand up now? Are we going to stretch? And it happens to all of us. Like I noticed this, like my husband has to bring my water to me because he's like, I know you're not going to drink water. You're deep in thought. So here's your water, and that's the pause where I'm like, oh, I probably should drink water. So let's talk about why it's important. Like why are we talking about making space for your pause? What have
Mhm.
you noticed in your line of work?
Well, if you look at the research around pausing, there's a lot of benefit to pausing. And I like to start there because so many of us, we want a logical reason
Yeah.
first, because then we can kind of create some buy-in for ourselves. So
Yeah.
the logical reason to pause from the research is twofold. So it helps us actually be more productive. There's a
Mhm.
study that I just cited. I've been doing some research on pausing, and I
Mhm.
just cited it in a free guide that I can talk about later.
Mhm.
Um, that taking a pause, even just 10 minutes in your day,
Mhm.
actually makes you 8% more productive, even
Mhm.
including the time lost to the pause. And it shifts your qualitative experience, your emotional experience by 5%.
Wow.
So if you take just a 10-minute pause, 10, even 15, 20 minutes, like it can be a small pause, it can be just this sliver, but it has such this outsized impact on both what we're able to create and produce, but also
Mhm.
on how we feel about our experience. And it's that
Mhm.
qualitative information that I
Mhm.
think is really the most important. Is how do we feel about how we're using our time? How do we
Mhm.
feel in our body? And so it has those two impacts. When I look at the women that I work with, I
Mhm.
think we are so other oriented, so many of us, that we are just innately, either through conditioning or through biology, there's lots of different arguments, but that we're caregivers, whether we have children to care for or parents that are aging that we needed to care for, or we work in a field where we hold space for others, that there's a lot of women who are other oriented, and
Mhm.
having those built-in moments where we actually toggle between ourselves and other are really profound for women, where we
Yeah.
can tap into our sense of interoception. So that's our ability to feel inward. So we have the five senses of exteroception, which are our ability to perceive our outer experience. So that's sense of smell, sight, the traditional five senses. But then we have this sense called interoception, and that's our ability to feel our own sensations, inner sensation, our emotions, and really get a sense of what is that experience like inside. And there's profound well-being benefits to cultivating that ability to sense inwardly. So interoception is actually linked to a lot of well-being benefits, and some of them have to do with being able to tell when we're in a stress state and take a break. Being able to tell, like, I'm thirsty and I need to drink some water, or I'm really tired. If we're not able to sense that we need a break, then we end up pushing ourselves so far that we get into, bordering on burnout. And so that those pauses both help us strengthen that sense of interoception, as well as give us a moment to really go in and listen and cultivate that ability, you know, even just a 1 minute check-in.
Mhm.
Do I need to move? Do I need to eat? Do I need to put my feet up and rest? And so
Mhm.
that we can build those pauses in,
Mhm.
because we are not machines. Like, we are, like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of mechanical perspectives of neuroscience,
Mhm.
but it's also the way that our body creates our experience. And so
Mhm.
it's a lot more magical and kind of amazing to me, the
Mhm.
nervous system.
Mhm.
And so it's not just a machine or a mechanism that if I do A, then B happens.
Mhm.
And we want to be able to tap into some of that. And our nervous systems require more care than I think most of us are giving ourselves at this point.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so much in there. I love it. No, I mean, you talked about, so introspection is something that um I work on with clients, and whether I call it introspection or not, right? It's being able to tap into your hunger and fullness, for example. Um, because kind of going back to what you were saying, if you're so focused on, for example, getting your work done, right? Um, and actually, a friend of mine was mentioning to me this. I met a friend in London, and she was just talking about, well, like if I work through lunch, I'm going to be able to get done earlier, right? So it's not even like I'm going to get more work done. It's like I want to be done with my day earlier. So how do you reconcile that piece? But like also if you are so focused, I mean, I get like that all the time where I'm like, I really need to stop doing this work right now and I need to eat something because I know when I eat something, I'll be like 10 times more focused. And I'll get so much more done. Right now, I'm like, or I need to step away and meditate because meditating will actually make me problem solve, like I'm spinning my wheels, so it's like that piece where I think I think it's very, very tempting to just go through and just keep going, to ignore hunger and because diet culture, to ignore rest, right?
Mhm.
Because you have to get stuff done. Um, and so I guess we're going to go right into a couple of things. One is, you know, the fact that, first of all, many of my clients struggle with taking that pause, right?
Mhm.
Um, and many people in general. I mean, like it's almost foreign. It's like when I tell my clients, hey, one way to do it is to block some time off in your calendar for lunch. That way it's there. But how many times have we done that and then we just ignore it anyway,
Mhm.
right? So
Yes.
it's a little bit of like, how do you, and we'll talk about that, I think, a little bit more in a bit, like the practical pieces of how do you make sure you take that space. But let's talk about eating for one. Like, based
Mhm.
on your research, because I know you've done some work around that as well. Let's hear it from you. What do you see as some of the benefits of making that space, making that time and energy for food?
Well, I
Um,
think what some of the most fascinating research is on cortisol, which I think a lot of us are aware is a stress hormone,
yep.
and the cycles of cortisol, and when it's supposed to peak is in the morning. And it's the hormone that helps us kind of wake up and come to life. And it also is elevated when we're in a stressful situation. But what I see with a lot of clients is that they skip food in the morning because of how hectic mornings
So
can be.
normal. Yeah.
But what that does is it actually leaves the cortisol and feels,
Earthquake.
yes. I was like, okay, that's not a door closing.
Should we go out? You
I'm
pause
glad we're
this.
here together doing
Like, imagine if you were in a different city, you would have been like, "What's wrong? What's wrong?"
exactly.
Awesome. So, um, we were talking about cortisol and why it's so important to eat in the morning and not skip your meals. So carry on.
Definitely. What an exciting moment. So might have felt a little cortisol spike just then in response, because that's the beautiful way that our bodies are maintaining homeostasis, is that
Yeah.
we can have this feedback come in to say, oh, is that a danger? Like, okay, we're okay. And
Yeah.
then we can come back down and kind of shake it off, which is beautiful, the way that we can respond to these things. So we were talking about cortisol, kind of
Mhm.
ironic.
Yep.
And just that is the hormone that is meant to, it has a specific job in the morning, which is to wake us up, get us, if you think about that transition from sleep to wakefulness, that's one of the biggest transitions
Mhm.
physically throughout our day. And so cortisol, it's job to basically like light us back up and say it's time to meet the day.
Mhm.
If we don't eat though at some point in the morning, and you know this,
It's a pet
that
peeve. Pet peeve.
cortisol, yes, oh my gosh, it really can wreak havoc, because food then, especially if we're eating something balanced in the morning, so
Mhm.
more than a cup of coffee, more than just grabbing a favorite carb,
Cereal. Cereal.
and yes, um,
Oatmeal.
oh
I
my
can name
goodness.
all of them. Muffins, pancakes, donuts.
Exactly. And I think it's worth doing an experiment in the morning and
Yeah.
maybe trying something with some protein or some fat, like some really
Mhm.
high quality protein or fat in the morning, and testing out, like, what is my normal breakfast? Try that out one day try out a breakfast that has some high quality protein, try out a breakfast that has high quality fats,
Mhm.
and just see, if you eat something. I find a lot of people do well eating dinner leftovers for breakfast,
Oh, yeah.
that the combination of fiber from vegetables
Mhm.
and high quality fat, high quality protein, that together can really help take you off that hamster wheel. If you were constantly feeling throughout the day these spikes
Mhm.
of stress hormone, often that goes back to that morning routine of just
Mhm.
not consuming, because we can get off that hamster wheel right at the beginning of the day. And if we eat something that really helps our body not feel in a stress state. So if we're eating something that is, really refined sugars or carbohydrates, we can start a cycle where that cortisol kind of always feels like, because it's
Mhm.
trying to protect us and say,
Mhm.
hey, wake up, we're in danger. It's continually responding to those changes in blood sugar. Whereas if we start the day with a foundation,
Yeah.
we can maintain that steady state more easily than we can respond to those spikes. It's
Mhm.
easier to stay in a steady state in the body. We naturally want to stay in homeostasis. And
Mhm.
so it's easier to move within a narrow band of frequency
Mhm.
than it is to be responding to, like, I don't eat until noon, and then I'm ravenous, so my blood sugar is so low, I grab the first thing I can. Most of us crave sugar in response to that.
Mhm.
It's a normal reaction of, like, I'm in
Mhm.
danger, my blood sugar is so low, I need to bring it up as quickly as possible.
Mhm.
And then we're continually moving within a wider band, and it
Yeah.
feels like a roller coaster. Our experience of that is much more like a roller coaster than staying within kind of this steady, narrow band with our blood sugar. So,
I'm
yes,
so
food
glad
is so
you're
important.
I'm so glad you're saying all of this, because this is exactly the kind of thing that I'm, trying to share with my clients. And, a lot of them do realize as soon as they start adding protein to their breakfast, not only are they a little bit steadier stress-wise, but they're also not craving, all of the stuff that they were craving before, and especially this little window that you talk about. Yeah, the window is boring. You're not going to get these like highs and lows, but it's so much better for your overall health, right?
Mhm.
Because as soon as you start going on the roller coaster, the problem with that is that it becomes cyclical, right? And that's that's a recipe to more blood sugar issues, and people don't necessarily realize that. They kind of wait for a diagnosis before they start doing anything about it. But as soon as you're ravenous, that's a blood sugar issue. It's
Mhm.
hypoglycemia. It's not hunger. Hunger is a more gentle, like, hey, I'm hungry. Ravenous, blood sugar issue. And I
Yes.
think that's the danger that people, like, I've struggled with blood sugar issues for a very long time until I realized how bad it was, and then I was like, okay, I gotta eat. Don't get anything between me and food when I have to eat, because that's dangerous for you. Okay, so going back to the pause, I mean, so important to take that pause to eat, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so let's talk about making space for that, because I think that's the container in which you take that pause is really important as well, right? Because you could
Yes.
take that pause and be like, okay, I'm going to grab a sandwich and I'm going to just work through lunch.
Mhm.
And you know, my take on that is your body is still moving. Your body is potentially still in stress mode. You're not going to be digesting your food when you're in stress mode. Take 15 minutes out, walk away from your computer, walk away from your work, eat, come back to it. It's not going anywhere, right?
Yes.
So, and I have my own rituals in place to do that.
Mhm.
Like, and happy to share them later, but I want to hear from you. If I was to try to create or help my clients with creating space, what is one way that you might suggest, or one sort of practice or exercise that they could be doing to create space for themselves?
Well, I think what's interesting about space is that we're all very different. We have
Mhm,
similarities, right? That we're all human, we all have a nervous system, we all need to eat and fuel
mhm,
ourselves. But
mhm,
we all also have these beautiful, unique differences. And so, what creates a space to pause for me is going to be different than what creates a place that's restful for you to digest.
mhm,
And so,
mhm,
what I often like to do is do a visualization
mhm,
where we move inward for that interoception again and really get in touch with what do those spaces, where do I feel most at ease?
yeah.
And then how can I recreate that? And in feng shui, the tool that I often use is a spectrum between yin and yang. And so many of us automatically think of yin. Yin is the more receptive, more grounded, low, less active element
Mhm,
in feng shui. It's that side of this spectrum, this
mhm,
duality.
mhm,
And yang is much more active and bright and light. And so when we think about rest, often we think it's got to be yin, but so
mhm,
much of us we have a makeup of yin and yang inside of ourselves. We have our own preferences, and it's
mhm,
really important to honor those. And so looking for clues in the places where we are the most happy and
mhm,
paying attention to what's yin, what's yang in those spaces. Some
mhm,
of us are really happy in yang spaces where there's a lack of clutter and there's just this openness. Some of us like a little more yin. Like if you look at the two spaces behind us, I
mhm,
would say I have a little bit more yin. I've got
mhm,
these dark colors. I've got a collection of books. So collections are more yin in a space
mhm,
and more texture. So all of these
mhm,
plants are adding
mhm,
a lot more texture. Now
mhm,
you may have yin spaces like this in your home, but just
mhm,
this is a great point of comparison right now. You have it's a lighter color scheme. If you look at the
mhm,
white,
mhm,
um, everything you have more light coming in through that
mhm,
window.
mhm,
You've got contrast there is also, so you've got that pillow and that dark and that light is also bringing in, so your space is slightly more yang.
Mm-hmm.
You have yin elements like the softness and the drape of that blanket, the texture of that blanket.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, if we were comparing the two, your space is slightly more yang and my space right now is slightly more yin.
Yeah.
We want to kind of do a little inward deep dive to
Mm-hmm.
figure out what are the spaces that we thrive in, and how can we take a meal in a space that aligns with that, in that spectrum between yin and yang. I think of it like a dial, so that we
Mm-hmm.
can spend even 10 or 15 minutes in an environment that is nourishing us while we're actually consuming nourishment as well. And then we reap the benefits on multiple levels. So I always talk about the nervous system being like a satellite dish, and
Mm-hmm.
that it is responding to and receiving messages from our environment as well as communicating to our environment. And so that we really have this reciprocal relationship with our environment, and we can cultivate our environment. It's one of the few things in life we have control over, is some of the things that we surround ourselves with. And so
Yeah.
when we sit down to a meal, can we create that space that is in alignment and creates kind of some coherence with where we are on that dial, what feeds us. And so just taking that pause away can be really beneficial for the nervous system and just make us feel good. I want to feel good.
Yeah. And so just so I'm kind of, because I'm very new to the idea of yin and yang, especially from the feng
Mhm.
shui standpoint, and I think it's fascinating. Um, and I love that you said that, everyone will have a slightly different approach to it, right? Like,
Yes.
what is going to give me that pause that I want to nourish myself in? I just think that's such a beautiful idea or concept. So are you saying that rest and digest, the parasympathetic state, is something that some people will um, kind of get to in yin and some people will get to in yang?
Yes, that's
That's
it
so
exactly. And so
amazing.
for so many of us, we need to be in a clutter-free, distraction-free zone. And we
Hmm.
need a lot of like tangible white space as well
Hmm.
as metaphorical white space in
Hmm.
order to really unplug. Those spaces are very yang. And so for some of us, we need that yang space. We need that open, light, like not a lot of pattern, not a lot of texture, in order to really unplug and connect inward. And for other people, having almost like it's almost like nesting, that they feel more connected to themselves in textured, layered, um, a lot of us talk about like cozy or hygge, like those kinds of spaces
Hmm.
help go inward. And so it really is about cultivating a space that aligns with our own preferences. So I have a tool I call the Goldilocks gauge, which
Hmm.
is really about figuring out what's the just right
Hmm.
for each of us as individuals, because we are so different, and we want to
Hmm.
honor that, we're not cookie cutters,
Hmm.
images of each other. So like,
Hmm.
you just raise your hand like, yes, I love a yang space. And we can see that difference, right? In between the two of our, like, I like having visuals to be able to see
The,
that
the,
right now you're in a slightly more yang space than I'm in. There are elements of my space that are very yang, but there are
yeah,
elements of your space that are yin, because it's a duality. There's a
got
relation
it.
between them. So there's
Yeah.
no 100% yang or 100% yin, but there's where are we kind of on that scale between the two, and what feels good, like what spot along that spectrum, and how do I like my yin? Like, I like a collection of books.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a beautiful throw blanket. Like, we both have yin in our spaces.
Hmm.
For yang, I have more straight lines. If you look at the bookshelf, you
Hmm.
have a lot of white in your
Mhm.
space. And so
Mm.
we have different preferences even in how yin and yang get expressed in our
So
environments.
interesting.
I think it's
I
fascinating.
I think the duality piece is really key though, because like I'm looking at the rest of my space and it's there is quite a bit of clutter. I will say it's not a clutter-free zone by any means, but when it comes to eating, when
Mhm.
we have our meals, for example, I mean, I will always try to go outside when I can, but like dinner time, I don't want to see computers. I don't want to see wires. I don't want to like once in a while we'll have the TV on while eating,
Mhm.
but for the most part, it's very much like I just want to focus on my food and I don't want to be reminded of work. I don't want to be watching, a thriller. Gives
Yes.
me
Oh
a
my
lot of anxiety. And so and I think we're going to get to that next, is
God.
how do we look within? Like if we were to do like a 1 or 2 minute
Let's
thing.
do it. Oh my gosh.
Awesome. Let's do
Yes,
it.
let's take a seat. So
Okay.
wherever you are, just come to a comfortable seat. So that might be in a chair. I'm sitting in a chair. You might be on the floor. You
Mhm.
might even be reclining back while you're watching or listening to this video. So wherever you are, just make yourself comfortable. Because again, we're going inward and we're going to find out how do we make ourselves just a little bit more at home,
Mhm.
both inner and outer. So let's get our bodies comfortable. Let's feel the weight of the sacrum. Let's feel the weight in our thighs and our hips, just really grounding downward. And if your feet are touching the floor, let's feel the feet. Can you feel the heaviness in the feet? You feel the pressure back from the earth, that beautiful interplay of gravity. And then let's begin to work with the spine. And feel how from that grounded place, from the foundation of the sacrum, that the spine reaches upward almost like a tree, and it's reaching up towards the light. And can you feel the crown of the head reaching up? You might tuck your chin slightly. You might feel your shoulders go back and down. We're just going to pause here for a moment. You might close your eyes and just notice the breath for a moment. We don't need to change anything. We're just observing what is. And then we're going to imagine ourselves opening a door in our mind. And we see that there's a spiral staircase. And it's going to go down, and we're going to follow those steps down, down, down. We might pass through the throat, might pass through the sternum. And we're really interested in moving down that spiral staircase and coming to the heart. Isn't she beautiful? And now just take a moment and imagine that there's a door into the heart. And you find it. And before you open it, I just want you to take a moment and realize that you're going to be entering a space that is for you. It is a sacred space or a peaceful place. It could be inside, could be an interior, or it could be outdoors. So we're going to open the door and we're going to step in. And we're just going to observe, where does our eye go? What do we see? What colors do we notice? What's the quality of the light? And then we might take a smell, might smell something. And then notice if there are any textures. Is there anything there to touch? And then let's move into sound. What do you hear in this space? We're going to take one last look around, noticing anything that you might have missed on first glance when you first stepped into this space, where you just feel so grounded and yet also a sense of vitality. Pause and look. And then we're going to take that information. We're going to step back outside the door. We'll close that door, maybe give it an affectionate little tap. Just thank you so much, heart, for showing us just a little glimpse into ourselves. And then we're going to climb back up that spiral staircase. We're going to pass the sternum, the clavicle. Feel yourself spiraling up through the throat. We're coming back into the conscious mind. And just pause here for a moment and savor just that little glimpse into ourselves and our own preferences that we found. And notice how we were able to take the essence of that space with us. And then rub the hands together just to create a little bit of warmth. If you're wearing glasses like me, you can take your glasses off your face. I'm going to take those warm palms. We're just going to place them really gently over the eyes. We might flutter the eyes open behind the palms. And almost like a game of peekaboo with ourselves, we're going to release the palms and just come back into the present moment, into this conscious space between us. And so from that, what we're really looking for, what are the clues to the spaces that feel most vivifying to ourselves? And we can take something so simple as a color from that place. And maybe we place a napkin in that color when we are coming to pause to eat. Maybe we noticed a texture that was really, that spoke to us from that environment. And we can bring that texture into our place settings or the placemat that we sit, or maybe we create a dining room that's almost dedicated, like a sanctuary, a shrine to this space, so that we have a connection to this inner space where we can really get in touch with ourselves, and we take that into a tangible space. And it can be very subtle. A lot of people that I work with, it's about bringing that energy back into our tangible life and in our environments in really subtle ways that aren't very expensive. Like if you've noticed the quality of the light, if it was a really bright sunny beach that you were on, maybe turn the lights up while you're eating. If it was a room that felt really cozy and kind of rich, then dim the lighting or light a few candles. So I think there's so many ways we can play with the elements of our environment in a way that's really fun and supportive, that we may not even really be aware of. And then it's going to speak to us in a way that, I often talk about how our environments speak to us in metaphors. And so we can create a metaphor around us that is speaking a really kind and loving story to ourselves while we take these pauses. And then it doesn't require as much effort to get into that space, because the environment it's like a cocoon that creates that space for us. And so it brings ease to this process of taking a pause.
Yeah.
So the way that the mind works is that often there'll be like a trigger of some kind that can help us step into a different state of mind. And so environment is really powerful for that as well. When we look at a lot of the research on habit cultivation, that environment plays a really large part in that. And so we can create these environments for ourselves. Can I ask what your space is like? I would love to know.
Oh my gosh, I was hoping you would. Um, because if you're watching the recording, you might see me like smiling. And like I was trying not to giggle, but my space, it was for the first time I've actually done a visualization like that. It was just so beautiful, like opening, like opening the door to your heart. That was so lovely. Um, but I mean, it was the very first thing that kind of came to mind was this, it was like it was soft and fluffy and white. Like that's what the
Mm,
walls of my heart. And I was like,
beautiful.
where is this coming from? It was like a really soft white blanket. And so when you're asking me about the sounds, I was like, it's just soft and fluffy. It's just,
Oh, and
I just
don't
want to
you
like
love that
cuddle.
muted feeling? Like there's that kind
Yeah.
of muffled silence. Oh, that sounds so delicious.
But
Oh,
what would that mean? Because I mean, I love daylight. But then when I'm eating, I do know I don't like bright lights. Just in general, I
mhm.
don't like bright lights. I don't mind natural bright lights,
Yes.
but not like fluorescent, and so I do like dim lights.
So what I'm hearing, like just as someone who pulls, like I'm usually a mirror for people as we talk
Yeah,
about space. So
yeah.
from that space, I would say that you do want yin, like but where your yin shows up is going to be in texture. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be in creating some of that softness,
Mm-hmm.
and that a lighter yang color palette could be really powerful for you. So stay with the whites, the pastels that are very yang, but that having something. So for some of us, the yin is going to be in the lighting. The yin is going to
Mm-hmm.
be in the collections or the textures or the collectibles. Um, Low and kind of close to the earth is also yin. So for some of us, we're going to pick out those qualities of what did I like. So for you, I think it's texture. And
Yeah.
so finding ways to bring in, like even the blanket behind you, like I mentioned earlier, is very yin. So
Mm-hmm.
finding ways to bring that in. So you might, if you have hard chairs in your dining room or where you
Mm-hmm.
like to eat, you
Mm-hmm.
might consider getting like a sheepskin or a
Mm-hmm.
like a faux sheepskin throw, like something that is
Mm-hmm.
white and fluffy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You might think about putting a throw blanket on the back of a hard chair. Because again, I like to work in ways that are really accessible and use what people already have. So you
Yeah.
might have something that you could place on a harder chair, but finding ways to bring in that softness. I have an outdoor area that I've set up to eat, and there's like 2 to 3 pillows in each chair
Yeah.
because I really like to feel that supported, soft kind of, and they're rounded chairs. And so
Yeah.
it's like a half barrel chair. And so
Mm.
it feels like this little nook that's nurturing me. And
Yeah.
then the yang comes from the sunlight. The colors of the pillows are brighter, so the sensory piece, the softness, the upholstered, all of that is very yin. And then
Yeah.
the yang is kind of from that bright sunlight or the white color palette or even bright pops of color like your beautiful pillow. And so that creates kind of like this energizing element as well. So with the white, I would say that is really where you can lean into the yang, kind of
Mm-hmm.
just that clear, open, bright kind of air. I
Mm-hmm.
felt a sense of airiness to it. And so
Mm-hmm.
it has a sense of lightness to it, that there isn't kind of this weighing down. And then
Mm-hmm.
that's supported by all that texture, all that
Mm-hmm.
beautiful yin texture. And so I think
Yeah.
for you, I would look at where can you add texture rather than color, or
Mm.
rather than collections. Your yin wants to really come through in texture, I would say.
And would it count because I know when I cook, I tend to put in a lot of texture. That's where I add my texture, and that's what gets me like excited about
Yes.
eating. And so,
Mhm.
would that count?
Definitely. And
Okay, cool.
even maybe there's texture, maybe you have dishes that, like, I'm just thinking about,
Mm-hmm.
whoever's listening, maybe you use dishes that have texture. Maybe they're white. Maybe you make a curry, but you put it in a white bowl. So it's got that
Yeah.
little bit of of clarity from the yang, but
Yeah.
it's a really beautiful textured ceramic bowl. And
Yeah.
so it has that sensory feeling that's more yin, and you get to play with that balance.
Yeah. That's so interesting. And I'm so happy we talked about this today because, and when I work with clients, one of the things that I will recommend is, especially if you're trying to move towards mindful eating, is to start to create your own ritual. And I think, what we just went through is a big part of that. It's like, what are the feelings that you want to feel when you're eating? What are the things that make you feel the most nourished? Um, or help you use all your senses, or help you savor your food more. Because we do have a choice, and it's funny because a few years ago, I was gifted these bowls, and you'll probably see them in all my Instagram posts. But they're made um, by this artist in Texas, and I admired them for a while and then finally was gifted these bowls. And I
Mm,
use them all the time, like literally for every single meal, unless I'm having, something that requires a plate. But like they're fairly small, but for some reason my husband will use other bowls. I will always go back to these bowls. It's like a really special part of my ritual. Um,
yes.
and so I feel like that's also a little bit underrated, finding a ritual
Mm,
that works for you, that gets you excited about your food. Maybe it's even the kind of cutlery you use.
mhm.
Such a big difference.
Our environments make a huge difference. I mean, our
Yeah.
nervous system is picking up on all of those cues, and
Hmm.
we can create an experience for ourselves. You're going to eat out of a bowl anyway. You can
Yeah.
have a set of really special bowls where
Yeah.
you, like you were saying, you've used them for years and you love those bowls. So you can have that, or you can
Yeah.
have a different experience. You're going to eat
Hmm.
out of a bowl either way,
Yeah.
but why not take that opportunity if you have the access and the means to have one special bowl
Yeah.
to pick up, like I have a mug and I love the
Yeah.
texture of this mug. And
Yeah.
so my husband, when he makes me tea, he doesn't make me tea in this mug. And he doesn't realize like how much I love the texture, I love the color, and
Yeah.
just the way it feels in my hand. Like he looks
Yeah.
for the efficiency of where's the biggest
Practicality.
where's the
Hmm.
biggest mug? And
Hmm.
so, but there is this relationship we have with our belongings, and they really can nurture us and add joy to any experience. And so when we're eating, when we're drinking, is there a way to use the things that we associate and create a ritual, create a space, create this sanctuary where we're meeting ourselves? Like I'm meeting myself when I drink out of this mug because it speaks to my heart. It speaks to that place in my heart. So for me, it's usually the ocean, and I love these ocean colors and even the matte texture that feels a little bit like sand. And so just being really mindful. My kids gave me this mug for Christmas. I picked it out, and then I usually give a couple of ideas of things I would love, and they pick
Yeah.
something. And so it makes them happy too to see like
Yeah.
how much I love this mug. I don't have 20 mugs. I just have one mug that I like, and then there's a couple of other bigger ones that my husband loves to use.
Yeah.
Just taking those opportunities to take care of ourselves.
Hmm.
That it is about nurturing ourselves and taking that pause. But
Hmm.
also, if you're going to take a pause, why not make it a little bit special by
Yeah.
including environmental cues that really kind of anchor in
Yeah.
hydration or anchor in mindfulness and slowing down. Like if I bring out, I have cloth napkins that I love that I got off Etsy that somebody made. They're not expensive, but they're just special to me.
Yeah.
And everybody knows like when those napkins come out, that's the cue. It's time to gather around. We're going to commune together around this table,
Yeah.
and we're going to relate to each other.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
what are the anchors that you can put in your environment that cue
Yeah.
to yourself? They don't have to be expensive or fancy,
No. No.
but it's just something that says, okay, it's time to switch gears. And
Um,
it's like a shorthand for ourselves so that we
yeah.
can switch with more ease. which I think is really useful because we have a lot of us are living hard lives, a
Oh
little
my gosh, you
is
took the words out of my
delightful.
mouth. This is the conversation I have with clients too. Like, your life is hard enough.
Mhm.
Added a little bit of joy here and there where you look forward to some of these things, whether it is stepping away from your computer, putting your legs up the wall for like 5
Yes.
minutes, something juicy, and, don't see it as selfish. It's not. It's actually,
Mhm.
you are a much richer person for taking that little pause,
Exactly.
and taking care of yourself. So, like, I know I did say that we could talk for hours, but we
We certainly could.
we do need to wrap this up. So how would someone go about working with you and learning more, like, even with the visualization and, learning their own personal styles? Where would they start if they were to work with you?
I think what I like to do is I can either work with people one-on-one, and I
Hmm.
also teach workshops and even courses. I have a course called Make Yourself at Home, and that is really about creating an environment that you love that loves you back.
Okay.
And so it really is about that relationship. So there's lots of ways. I think it would be useful to probably take a look at my website
Okay.
and just see what speaks to you. So always happy to work one-on-one with people. Sometimes um, our relationship to our environments can feel very intimate. And so
Yeah.
sometimes a one-to-one relationship working together can be really useful. I
Yeah.
work with a lot of people that do have a lot of clutter.
Hmm.
I like to say they have a lot of metaphors that are talking to
Hmm.
them.
Hmm.
And so in our culture, there's a lot of shame right now around having clutter.
Hmm.
So sometimes that can be done in a one-to-one container really well
Hmm.
so that people feel um, just really supported with like fine tuning that relationship to their environment. And other people, it can be so much fun to do
Yeah.
this like we're doing now with a group of people who are all going to like relate to their environment together. It can be
Yeah.
really fun.
Mm.
And so there's that option as well. And then meditation, I usually teach through the studio.
Yep.
And so there's
And
lots
you
of ways
have
to
and you
get
have a
there.
course coming up that starts on Thursday.
Exactly. And so that is it's the gift of presence.
Hmm.
And my co-teacher, who actually was originally my teacher, Jennifer
Yeah.
Prue,
And
and
my teacher.
yes, oh, we love Jen. So she will be presenting a lot of practices and some of the theory, like some of the philosophy behind
Mhm.
cultivating being present. And then I bring in, like I do into all of my work, a lot of the scientific research and the neuroscience, and just how these practices, how these well-being practices all really support our nervous systems, and just deepening. I think we hear a lot about nervous systems recently in different places, but really deepening that understanding, I think, helps us create a sense of more compassion for ourselves. And
Yeah,
so
so
deepening our
important.
understanding of the nervous system so that we can really approach ourselves with more compassion and
Yeah,
support.
yeah. No, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. So, definitely checking out your website. And what is your website again? I'm gonna put it in the.
Yes, I think right now I'm using Kajabi. So it has,
Okay.
yeah, can we post
You'll
it?
send it. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
we'll post it in the thing. And then anything else that you want to share that's coming up that you think that people really should sign up for? Definitely checking out the course with you and Jen Prue. Um,
I also have a
I
free guide that you were so generous enough to share a tidbit that is all about pausing and resetting. It's a
Yep.
free guide. It includes a lot of research. So I surveyed some of my favorite experts like
Mhm.
you and
Thank you.
asked how do you practice pausing and
Mhm.
resetting?
Mhm.
And then I went on a hunt for a few months to look for the research that supported those
Mhm.
practices. And
Mhm.
so that also will be available actually later this week.
Oh,
Uh,
yay.
finally edited and ready to go. And it's
Yay.
just I think a lovely way to sense it creates almost like a menu
Hmm.
for those of us who we get a moment to pause. I don't know if
Hmm.
this happens to everyone. When my husband would take the kids when they were little, and I'd be like, oh, this is amazing. I have a moment. And I had no idea what to do. And so looking at what all of these experts and entrepreneurs and artists, what do they do when it comes time to pause? Just so you have a menu to choose from and you don't get stuck in that place where you're like, well, I had half an hour. I
Yeah.
could have taken a bath or read a book or had a really beautiful snack or smoothie. Um, but I missed it because I got so stuck on not knowing what to do. So I'm really excited to be putting that out there, and it's just a free resource that'll be
I'm
there for
so
people.
excited to see it too. Gosh, I'm
So
gonna keep an eye
exciting.
out. Yeah, and I know it'll come out in your email.
Yes,
I
yes.
do want to do a quick shout out to your emails as well. Sign up for Jen Walthers emails because they're just lovely. I love reading them. I mean, I think, whether it's even just hearing what you did over the summer, it's just another really lovely way to pause. So can't wait to look for that guide, that free guide. And then I definitely think your course, Make Yourself at Home, sounds amazing. Especially if it's similar to what we just went through. I
It
think
is.
so
Yeah.
many people could benefit from that and just taking that time to like get to know. Because I think another thing you said, I know we're way out of time now, but another thing that you said about, there's so much shame around clutter. And I wanted to just take a pause there because are you saying that there's nothing wrong with clutter?
There's nothing wrong with clutter.
Yeah, you heard it here first, people.
There's
There's
nothing wrong with
nothing wrong
clutter.
with clutter. So glad. So glad.
And there
Because,
are lots of ways that clutter serves us. And
yeah.
so when we need clutter, it will kind of accumulate. And when I think the tricky bit is when we're in transition and we don't need clutter, how do we release it
Yeah.
so that our home, I always talk about the home almost as if it's a body,
Hmm.
that clutter comes in to be metabolized and to be digested. And then we take what's of value from that clutter and we let it serve us. And then we need to let it's cyclical, just like what we've been talking about. And so then we need to let some things go when it's time, right? So there's a time for clutter. When we really do it, clutter is yin, right? And so when we need to feel kind of in that yin, grounded, nurtured space, a
Yeah.
lot of us will accumulate a little bit of clutter, and it serves us well. And the thing is everything is cyclical, so we don't necessarily want to just get stuck there. And where it can be helpful to work with clutter and with somebody who maybe can help you process clutter so
Hmm.
that it does get
Hmm.
metabolized is when that clutter gets stuck and it starts to keep you stuck in certain habits or behaviors, that it's almost like it becomes an imprint and you can't act outside of that imprint. It's almost like a memory foam mattress. You know how if you sleep on a memory foam mattress, you create an imprint of your body. And at some
Hmm.
point, sometimes you can't sleep a different way. Like if you're a side sleeper,
Hmm.
you want to sleep on your back, you can't. So when clutter is not a problem until you want to roll on your back and you can't because there's
Yeah.
not room for it. So it's
Yep.
cyclical, and you'll know when it starts to feel uncomfortable, then you know it's time to digest a little bit.
Goodness, I want to hear more and more about this because, like, now I'm thinking clutter isn't just in your home, it's in your inbox, it's in your social
Mhm.
media, it's in your mind,
Yes,
all of these things. And maybe we can do another one of these in the spring
I would
with
love
spring
that.
spring cleaning and
Yes.
dealing with clutter.
That would
Okay.
be fabulous. I would love that. I have a ton of strategies for when it is time to deal with clutter. When it's comforting
Yeah,
you, when it's doing its work, just let it comfort you.
amazing.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Jen. This has been an absolute pleasure. I know we had a little bit of an earthquake in the middle of this, which was a first for both of us. And so, thank you so much for hanging in there with me. And I hope you had you got some value out of this conversation. If you're watching the recording, please do check Jen out on her website, check her course out, check out all her offerings, sign up for her mailing list, check out her free guide. I mean, everything you're going to learn from Jen is going to be amazing and will help you with your nervous system and help you just kind of just create that space for yourself inside and go home to yourself. So
Mm,
I
thank you
appreciate
so
you
much.
so much. Thank you.
What a great conversation. I couldn't have spent the day in a better way. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. The pleasure was all mine.